Public health can be very controversial, and one of the factors that contributes to this are the coexisting perspectives of social justice and market justice. Social justice aims at equal distribution of the resources within a society among all the people in the society, and it would see health as a social responsibility. Market justice, on the other hand, does not look at health or the distribution of resources as to be equal or the responsibility of society, but it aims for the individual, not the collective responsibility of health. Here is a list of the characteristics of market and social justice. As you look down the columns, you can see the difference in terms of market justice being based in the economic growth or in the economy, the ability to pay, versus social justice is more of a collective, a societal responsibility for individuals, and a distribution of the resources equally across the individuals in the society. So whereas market justice views healthcare as an economic good, social justice would view it as a resource to be distributed. Market justice assumes free market conditions for health service deliveries, whereas social justice would require an active governmental involvement in health service deliveries. Now, I also want to say it doesn't have to be government. It could be just some outside organization that helps to assure equal access to healthcare services. Market justice assumes markets are more efficient in allocating resources equitably, whereas social justice says this outside entity is more efficient in allocating the health resources. Market justice looks at production and distribution with regards to supply and demand and the market-based decisions, whereas social justice looks at medical resources and allocating them per a person's need. Market justice views medical care as a distribution based on a person's ability to pay, whereas social justice would see it as a right, and it should be inconsequential in terms of a person's ability to pay. Market justice, a characteristic, says that access to medical care is viewed as an economic reward for personal effort, whereas social justice deems access to medical care should be equal, regardless of a person's ability to pay. Here is a list of implications of the two different perspectives. Whereas market justice says that health is an individual responsibility and that benefits are based on purchasing power, it limits the obligation of the collective good with an emphasis on well-being, and that there are private solutions to social problems, and it rations based on your ability to pay. So market justice would say each individual person in a society is responsible for their health care, and it should be based on the person's ability to pay. Social justice takes the perspective that there's a collective responsibility for health, and that everyone is entitled to a basic care package. There's a strong obligation to the collective good, that public solutions are what are needed for social problems, and that there's a planned rationing of health care. It's not based on a person's ability to pay, but on their need. If you think about health insurance now, if any of you have tried to get medical care, you can see that it depends upon your medical coverage and what will be paid for as opposed to what isn't covered. This might impact your decision whether or not to have a screening or a diagnostic tool recommended by a physician. In relationship to health law and policy, an important implication of social justice is that community well-being supersedes that of the individual. We'll find that when we look at health policy and health law, we consider who bears the burdens and who gets the benefits. And we'll make choices where individuals might be deprived of certain individual rights, but it's for the greater good of the community. Of course, any right given up cannot be a right that's guaranteed by the Constitution, as those are protected by the Constitution. This is an important concept in public health law. Public health, as you probably could have figured out, takes a social justice perspective. It looks at the collective responsibility for health. And we would advocate that public policy must go beyond the individual sphere and affect the greater community. Whereas some would say, I can do whatever I want, it's my individual choice, public policy would say, well, you do have individual rights guaranteed by the Constitution, but there are some behaviors, aka things like smoking, that aren't guaranteed by the Constitution. And so we need to look at the greater good of the community as opposed to the individual right. So here's an example in the middle here, getting vaccinated or purchasing health insurance. These are individual decisions. However, our public policy about vaccination or health insurance can encourage or discourage people from getting them, depending upon how they benefit the society. So when we consider health policy, two questions to ask are who gets the benefits and who bears the burdens. Let's consider purchasing health insurance. If we mandate, as we have, that everyone needs to purchase health insurance if they're not having it provided by an employer, who gets the benefits and who bears the burdens? Well, you might say that the individuals get the benefit of being insured, and if they have an accident or an illness, they'll get covered and they'll get access to health care. They still have to pay for it. So who bears the burdens? If all individuals pay the same amount for their health insurance, is that burden equal across all persons? I would say no, because of the differences in income. A person who makes $30,000 a year is going to have quite a different burden than a person who makes $60,000 or $70,000 a year if they're having to pay the same amount for a health insurance policy. So as you go through and look at laws, consider who gets the benefits and who bears the burdens. This is where we can look at public policy to determine if it's discriminatory or racist.